You've heard the stories, right? The ship of dreams, this incredible technological marvel that was so advanced, so powerful, that people literally called it unsinkable. And yet, on its very first voyage, it just vanished into the icy depths of the Atlantic, taking over 1,500 souls with it. So together, let's peel back the layers and uncover the real story of the Titanic. I mean, this is the question that has haunted us for over a century. How does a ship with a reputation for being invincible sink in less than 3 hours? Was it just some crazy freak accident, a terrible twist of fate, or was it something else entirely? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the cascade of failures, the hidden flaws, and the human errors that all lined up to cause one of the most infamous disasters in history. So let's actually start at the end of the story, with the shocking, unbelievable outcome of that first and only voyage. Yeah, this really isn't just a story about a ship, is it? It's a human tragedy on a scale that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. More than 1,500 people, men, women, children, crew, they all lost their lives that night. What was supposed to be a symbol of progress became a tomb of ice and steel. Just try to imagine this scene for a second. On April 10th, you have over 100,000 people showing up just to watch this magnificent ship set sail. The air is just buzzing with hope and excitement. And then, not even a week later, that dream of a new world becomes a watery grave. It's just staggering. So the big question is, how did it all go so terribly wrong? Well, to figure that out, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to understand why everyone was so convinced this ship was completely invincible in the first place. See, the Titanic wasn't just another ship. It was a statement. It was a monument to human ingenuity and just sheer ambition. This was what everyone believed. I mean, we're talking about a floating palace. It had a heated swimming pool, a full gym, multiple fancy restaurants, even Turkish baths. It was the absolute pinnacle of luxury. But its real selling point? Its safety. It was advertised as the strongest, most secure passenger ship ever built, period. And the engineering behind that unsinkable claim really was state-of-the-art for its time. For starters, it had a double-bottomed hull. Think of it like a safety net. If the outer layer gets punctured, there's a whole second layer to keep the ship secure. Then, and this was the game changer, its lower section was divided into 16 separate watertight compartments. The idea was pretty simple. If one section gets damaged, giant doors slam shut and the water's trapped. And here's the crucial part. The ship was specifically designed to stay afloat even if the first 4 of these compartments were completely flooded. And that right there was the key. The engineers, the builders, the public, everyone was convinced that no single accident could possibly damage more than 4 of those massive compartments at the same time. It just wasn't considered a technical possibility. The ship, they thought, was foolproof. But as we're about to see, even a supposedly foolproof design is no match for a perfect storm of human error. A whole series of seemingly small mistakes started to pile up, one after another, creating the perfect conditions for a disaster. When you look at the timeline, it is just staggering. A month before the voyage, a sister ship breaks down, which forces them to rush the Titanic's launch and cut its safety trials short. Then, right before they set sail, an officer gets replaced and he accidentally walks off with the key to the locker with the ship's only pair of binoculars. On the day of the disaster, the owner of the company, who just happened to be on board, reportedly pushes the captain to keep going full speed. They wanted to set a new record, even though they got at least 7 different iceberg warnings. So by nightfall, they're basically flying at full speed through a dark, moonless ice field. What could possibly go wrong? And these weren't just unlucky moments. They were absolutely critical oversights. Without binoculars, the lookouts were essentially blind. The ship only had enough lifeboats for about half the people on board, which, believe it or not, was actually legal back then. And to make a terrible situation even worse, in the chaos of the sinking, the crew panicked and launched the first few lifeboats less than half full. So all of these mistakes, all of these errors, they're all about to come to a head in a matter of minutes. And that's going to lead to 2 hours and 40 minutes of just pure chaos and terror. It's 11:40 at night. Lookout Frederick Fleet finally sees it, a huge dark mass dead ahead. He rings the warning bell 3 times, phones the bridge, and screams, "Iceberg, right ahead!"
The officer on duty, William Murdoch, immediately orders the engines reversed and the ship turned hard. But it's just too late. A ship that big, moving that fast, simply can't stop or turn on a dime.
And here is the ultimate tragic irony. In trying to avoid a direct hit, Murdoch might have actually sealed the ship's fate. See, a head-on collision probably would have crumpled the bow and flooded maybe 2-3 compartments at most. That's a disaster the Titanic was literally built to survive. But instead, the iceberg scraped along the ship's side, popping rivets and tearing open a long gash that breached 6 compartments. The one thing they thought was impossible had just happened. The math of that night is just grim. You've got over 2,200 people on the ship, but there's only lifeboat space for a little over half of them. And because the evacuation was so chaotic, only 706 people actually made it into a lifeboat and survived. That means over 1,500 people were left behind on a sinking ship in the middle of a freezing ocean. And what's just absolutely heartbreaking is that help was so close. Another ship, the SS Californian, was stopped for the night because of all the ice, only about 37 kilometers away. Its crew actually saw the Titanic's distress flares, but they just thought they were company rockets or something. Why? Because their one and only radio operator had shut everything down and gone to bed just a few minutes before the Titanic sent its first SOS call. A rescue was right there, just over the horizon and yet so tragically far away. For decades, that was pretty much the story, a terrible tragedy of bad luck and human error. But then, 73 years later, the wreck of the Titanic was finally found, and it started to reveal its final darkest secrets. In 1985, an oceanographer named Robert Ballard finally did it. He found the wreckage, nearly 4,000 meters below the surface of the ocean. The ship had actually broken in two, its remains scattered all over the seafloor. And for the very first time, investigators had actual physical evidence they could analyze. So, what did they find down there? What could all that twisted steel tell us that the survivors couldn't? Well, the answer would completely change how we understand this disaster. The wreck uncovered 2 critical hidden flaws. First, when scientists analyzed the metal, they found that the rivets holding the hull together weren't made of high-quality steel. They were made of cheaper, weaker iron, a cost-cutting measure. So, when the iceberg scraped the side, the rivets didn't break, they just popped out, allowing the hull plates to peel open. But the second flaw is even more shocking. There's evidence that a fire had been burning in one of the ship's coal bunkers for days, even before it left port. This fire could have weakened the steel hull in that one area by up to 70%. And in the most awful twist of fate imaginable, that weakened section was the exact spot where the iceberg struck. So you see, the Titanic wasn't just unlucky, it was compromised from the very start. That combination of weak rivets and a fire-damaged hull meant that the unsinkable ship was, in reality, incredibly fragile. In the end, it really wasn't one single thing that sank the Titanic. It wasn't just the iceberg. It was a perfect storm of everything. The pressure to be the fastest, the missing binoculars key, the ignored warnings, not enough lifeboats, the radio that was turned off, and, of course, the fatal flaws hidden in its very construction. It was a tragedy born from hubris, from the belief that they had conquered nature. And that really leaves us with a haunting final thought, doesn't it? If the lookout had had his binoculars, if the builders had just used steel rivets, if the Californian's radio had been on for just 10 more minutes, if any single link in that fatal chain had been broken,